Welcome back to round 6. Inigo and Jörg are talking about the match against DaSneakyPete. And I had the information from the data collection team that DaSneakyPete plays Reanimator. And in this situation, I was already in 5-0, but unluckily I got the down pair to the 4-1 player. So yeah, I watched on my tiebreakers and they weren't bad, but I was a bit unfortunate to get the down pair because if I play the round against the other player in the 6th round, it was Deltar and he was playing Painter. So even if I lost against Deltar in the 6 rounds, this would have improved my opponent's score, and by that I would have been in the top 8 from 99.9%, I would say. But with the down pair, it was a bit worse. So depended on the other results of the match for sure. But here, yeah, I knew that I played against Reanimator and I'm on the draw. So I think I have the only card which matters in my configuration. So as I don't play the Endurance in the main deck, the only way to steal the game is that your opponent maybe mulligans or have a very slow hand and need to find a specific type of card and is waiting too long. So I can stick the Reclaimer on the battlefield and keep it up with the Bujuka Bok. What do you say to this hand, Inigo?
I probably would mulligan. We don't have the guaranteed second land to activate Reclaimer. And if we lead on Reclaimer, we want 100% the ability to activate it turn 2. So if I knew I was playing Reanimator with that information, I would probably mulligan the hand.
Interesting. Okay. So usually I don't ever mulligan a hand with Elvish Reclaimer if I play against Reanimator. But as you said, as we are not having a guaranteed activation out of it, could be a way, but I think the chances are so low that that works anyway. So I think the more resources you have, the better your hand gets, and especially if you are able to stick the Reclaimer on the battlefield and prevent the Grizzlebrand from coming into play, then you can set up a couple of things and you have a bit of card draw, so it is okay to find a way to win on, to have a deterministic kill on turn 4 or 5, I would say, with this hand, if we get a natural order. So yeah, but it didn't really matter. So here I decided to keep because this is the only card which matters against the opponent's deck. And the opponent started with a Faceless Looting, discarded Grizzlebrand and Sarah's Emissary, and then they went for Dark Ritual into Reanimate, and then they drew a bunch of cards, so I don't even need to stop it here. And then they added Exhume, and
Yeah.
when they wanted to see my hand, I just
Mulligan
switched.
decision really didn't matter, so
Yeah, and then I let them doing what they are trying to do. But then
yeah.
when they want to see my hand, I think there is 0% chance here, 0% chance to beat that board here.
Yeah.
There are some corner case scenarios where you are able to beat either of those, especially but with the Grizzlebrand, they are drawing too much cards each turn, and
Probably not both at the same time.
exactly. So there
And
are
also, I want to note here that note F6 in here, extremely important due to give them free information. If you F6, it's a good chance you're not able to stop the all yields in time for the Griff when you see it cast, and your hand gets rebuilt, and that is a big disadvantage.
yeah, you're right. So this is a very fast matchup anyway. So it doesn't really matter how much time we lose while interacting or while the interface are waiting for our okay. But it's absolutely right. This also indicates that we are maybe a deck with interaction. So, and the opponent could have taken another route or a more safer route, for example, like a setup turn and then with a discard spell next turn. This wouldn't have changed the outcome of this match or this game, but let's assume we just top deck the Bojuka Bock and then, or once upon a time into the Bojuka Bock, then we suddenly have a play. But if we are just F6ing, it's yeah, especially too risky with the discard spells. But on the other hand, I sometimes like doing that, even if I have interaction. So I feel like I'm able to react fast enough. So you can just right click here, and usually if it's not a replay, you just have your
Yeah,
mouse
you
on
as
it.
the second option, stop all
Exactly.
yields or yeah, unyielder.
You mark it here, and then you use either your keyboard or you use your mouse, and you just click on it, and then the yield is away.
Yeah.
So, and then it sometimes works against the combo players because they think, oh, they are F6'd, they don't have anything, especially if you have like cards like Mindbreak Trap or so, which are only working under small circumstances, then you can just remove the yield and react on that. So it is hard to get, and you have to be very careful, and it's very annoying if it doesn't work or you aren't interacting fast enough. So that's right, but it sometimes can happen to just give the opponent the false information. So if you're never F6ing, they think, okay, they have anything, I have to play around something. But if you're F6ing, but you have some protection, then they're thinking, okay, they have
Yeah,
nothing,
yeah,
I can go
maybe
for
they
it.
misplay. What you mean is maybe they misplay because they recognize you are F16 and maybe they just don't play perfect sequencing because they get confident. So that I think that's what you mean.
Yeah, and especially against Reanimator, in this case, there are situations where you can't do anything anyway. So let's talk about if they just starting with a discard spell, you can't respond with your interaction. You can't respond with your Mindbreak Trap then. You can't respond with your Endurance then. You can only scoop, for example, but yeah, okay, that's a different story. Like in the sideboarded games, then you don't need to scoop anyway because either you won game one and they know what you are doing, or you lost game one and then it doesn't really matter as they see that you have nothing. So you
Hmm.
can, um, and also they need a setup. So, and they have to cast some spells first to go for it. At least they need to go for if they are unmasking themselves or if they are entombing or dark ritualing into something. So you just prepare for that, open the menu, and then you have to click on time, but usually it doesn't isn't that problematic if you're not um, doing other things while
Yeah, if you're
playing.
paying
Take a
attention, you
drink,
usually have the time.
take a drink, or get some coffee out of the kitchen, and then it's over. So it's not that useful to do that. But yeah, what I wanted to say, you can manage to use those things in a positive way for you. Either if you have no interaction or if you have interaction. In both cases, both possibilities can have an advantage for you, but generally you're right. So here, not F6ing is important to not give the opponent the information in game one. I don't think that Mulligan would have changed anything here because
No, not really.
my list,
Especially on this configuration with no endurance in the main.
yeah,
So yeah, I think we can proceed to game two.
yeah, I just live with it that I just have a very bad spot against Reanimator in game one,
Yeah.
which we usually have anyway, but there are
Oh,
some,
interesting. Can you open the sideboard, the sideboarding you made?
yeah.
Okay.
Okay, here I
So
can
let's
also
see.
tell you what we did sometimes recently was um, adding Force of Vigor to the mix as well. So it can be okay if they are opting to go for a animate deadline.
Yeah, I was going
Uh,
to mention that I am surprised you didn't bring it in because when we were exploring for the first time the applications of Boseiju, one of the first thing I noticed was we could hit the animate dead when, as you well know, I'm sure, when opponent cast animate dead gets on the battlefield, and that generates a trigger that the
yeah.
opponent has to target the creature they want to reanimate. So you have a natural moment when you get priority back,
Mm,
and you are able to cast either Boseiju or Force of Vigor. So Force of Vigor here, stopping one third of the reanimation of spells, is definitely, I think, reason enough to bring it in.
mm, yeah. I think there is a big difference between the Force of Vigor and the Boseiju. Boseiju is usually a mana source, but it has a big upside that you can use it for that. And Force of Vigor usually is only like a pitch card for the endurance, I would say. But in my opinion, I think there is a difference to use those cards, and I think that Force of Vigor might be better to bring it in on the draw. So in the draw, you have more turn zero interaction if you bring it in, because sometimes they are forced to go for the animate deadline, or even um, or the most common line I would say is the reanimate line anyway, because it needs the least amount of mana. But even if they have the protection spell with the discard spell, if their only reanimation spell is the animate that and they see the Force of Vigor, you have double protection. So I think it's more important to have on the draw, because on the play we are able to interact a bit better with them. So we have the discard spells, and we are able to, yeah, come in a spot where we don't need the Force of Vigor that much. And we are also more likely to use the Elvish Visionary in the Wirewood Symbiotes anyway. So that's why I not opted to bring it on the play. But I would agree that it's okay to bring it on the draw, even if it only covers one third of the reanimation spells. But every edge counts, I would say, in this matchup, every edge
Yeah,
counts. And also cards like Mindbreak Trap, sometimes they don't do anything, and if they know about it, they can even play around it a bit, which give us more time, so it's everything we need. And here with this card the same, I would say, if they see it and they only have the animate that, they can't really go for it, and then they have to dig for another reanimation spell, for example. But could also
yeah.
be possible that the only two reanimation spells are Exhume and Reanimate, but at least it's still a pitch card for the endurance. So
I want to make another comment. I'm sorry for stopping this replay again, but I have found many times that a very strong card in strong card, a very card that can matter in this match is sometimes symbiote, and the way it can matter is if they go for a super fast reanimation, imagine a Griselbrand, or they go for a greedy activation and they go to a low life count. Usually they rely on Griselbrand making some blocks
yes,
to gain life.
very
So I have
relevant.
found
Yes,
I have found multiple times that the ability to bounce one elf back in hand to avoid the life gain. For example, imagine opponent is at I don't know, at 5 life, and you have 3 elves to attack. If normal situation, they could just block one and survive the attack. But if you have a symbiote in hand, you can prevent the life gain of the one they are blocking and get full 10 damage passed through the Griselbrand.
yes.
So in this matchup I keep that in mind, and try to keep at least 3 wirewoods. So I go down to one Visio, or I think maybe I cut shepherds even, and I also cut collector roof. So I want to keep the wildwood symbiotes in the deck.
Now, okay, I don't. I have a different opinion about Collector Roof, but that is also a long story. So Yeah, in my opinion, the Collector Roof has text against Reanimator, but it mostly depends on back the times where we had cards like Laden of the Void in the deck. So in this time, they usually didn't really play the show and tells, but usually they had access to cards like Serenity, and they needed to get the splash color. So disabling the Lotus Petal can matter, and there were also rare situations where they were able to cast any of the creatures from their hand by having two Dark Rituals, for example, and then if you can disable their mana producing ability can matter. And now some of the players, not all of them, but most of them are having the 3 or 4 show and tells in the sideboard. And there's also the same where they can lack of finding blue mana source, for example. So with this, I think the Collector Oath can have text, but the
Mhm.
difference, I think the difference between the Elvish Visionary and the Wirewood Symbiote and the Collector is so small. And then, as you told before, having a single copy in the deck for a specific situation can make a big difference. And also, there are rare lists with Reanimator, which also played Chromox in the past, so they can have more artifacts which Collector Oof can shut off. So having access to the card in some specific situations can help and win the game, but I'm not really sure that the Avish Visionary and the Wirewood Symbiote are doing that much of a big difference, but I usually also don't like to cut it entirely, so I usually let or keep in at least one of those in the situations. Either I cut them entirely or I keep one of those, but that depends on the matchup and on the sideboard configuration. So,
What do you
and
think about
another,
the
and another,
comment regarding the symbiote and the bouncing
yeah, that's
sequence?
very important. That's very important. That's not only important if you're attacking, that's sometimes that can also be important to be on the defense because there are some situations, it is also very rare, but it can happen that they discard, for example, like the Crater Roof and reanimate the Crater Roof and you go very low on life. And then with this option, you're able to protect from the attacking Crater Hoof, which attacks each turn. This happened to me a couple of times, but it was a long time ago. And in this time, I probably or we didn't had access to the grist already, so we didn't had an out for the for our own Crater Hoof anymore. But I think there are too much advantages with the card, and yeah, being able to search for it and to protect your attacking through the Grizzlebrand is very useful to push through the damage and to prevent the life gain.
Yeah, totally agree.
So here, yeah, I have a very solid hand, I would say. So I have the Reclaimer, I have the chance to find an Endurance, and I have also the very fast hands covered up by the Mindbreak Trap. So then the opponent had revealed Chancellor of the Annex, but that can relate to the lack of information of the opponent. So in my Goldfish history, he saw that I recently played Elves, but he also saw that I recently played Oops All Spells. Sorry, I have to just put on the light because it gets a bit dark here in the room. So, and I think in the dark they are protecting against a very fast combo deck with Oops. And on the worst case, it's not that helpful against elves, but can also sometimes do a good job against elf because he can slow down the first turn discard spell, for example. But here in this situation, I had a couple of options how I play this game because I could have also ignored the Chancellor, but I wanted to improve my chances because I wanted to stick the Reclaimer on the battlefield, and I have the turn 1 go off covered with a Mindbreak Trap already. So that's why I decided to play the Once Upon a Time into the Chancellor. I think the greediest line would be like playing a land and then hope to find an Endurance. But I think for me,
No,
uh,
you want the Reclaimer online as soon as possible, and especially with the double land drop already in hand, you are
yeah,
secure to be able to activate is you if you untap with it, and that is if you actually if you untap with Reclaimer, that is probably game.
exactly. So here this also can be discarded, but it's not that easy for them usually to discard and go off on the same turn. And with this combination of cards, I am very good covered already, and I don't need to find additional lands at this stage. So I think it's the safest line to go for the free spell, get it countered. On the other hand, I could have led with the Shepherd and tried the Reclaimer next turn, but it's way too risky for me. And the other line would be like hope to find an Endurance here, but that never happened to me. That never works to me. If I try to get the Endurance out of the end Once Upon a Time. So here they started with a discard spell, and now I have double protection, I would say. So there are very um, there are a lot of situations where this combination is unbeatable, especially if they are playing around the Bojuka Bock. So they can do a double setup, so they just set up and then they live with it, they exile, and then they try it another turn or another 2 turns, or they can just try to go for the Axiom and respond after with the Axiom on the stack. After I use the box, then they can cast an Entomb, for example, but the Mindbreak Trap covers that very good. So
Yeah.
here I decided to fetch preemptively because I didn't want the risk of if the opponent has a removal spell, it's unlikely, but it's not impossible. So some lists play cards like Fatal Push or Abrade or something like that. So no real big disadvantage to fetch first or immediately. So, but here they didn't do anything. Then
A card I have seen out of Reanimator is Feed the Swarm, and it reads one colorless, one black sorcery, destroy target creature or enchantment an opponent control.
yeah,
You lose life equal to that permanent mana value. So that is a card you can expect out of Reanimator because it covers two of the biggest weaknesses, which is Elvis Reclaimer and Leyline of the Void. So definitely it's possible that they play that.
yeah, I believe we see that card over the course of the game as well. So here I play all of my elves. So this has the advantage that I have a very fast board. The only risk is to play into the Massacre here. So, but I think the benefit of that is too high to just be fast enough. And here with this board, it's lethal on board. So they are dead on board with this with my creatures.
Yeah.
Not exactly. So in this situation, I needed a land from the top to activate the Elder Shepherd, or I needed to use one of those elves to get the additional mana, but I can still attack for 10 then. But
Yeah, so
here,
that's usually enough.
yeah, but here I didn't want to get the Archon on the battlefield,
Makes sense.
and here, okay, here I had the luck to draw the Endurance from the top also, so I took some damage in to prevent some specific lines involving the Griselbrand, but now here I have the double protection already, so I don't think that anything bad thing can happen. And here they'd only play the unmask on me, hardcasting it, so I can respond with the endurance and attack for lethal next turn.
Yeah. A good example of a game where you untap with Reclaimer and you probably are winning the game 90% of the time. Only most usual way you're not winning is if you top deck your own Bojukabog.
Yeah, sometimes sometimes that really happens, but most of the times you just hide the information then, and the opponent doesn't even know in specific situations and still plays around. But if they have the discard spell, then it's really bad because they see that we already have it. But it happens very rarely, I would say. But it's not impossible to happen. And yeah, I think you can try to avoid giving too much information if you just keep the reclaimer up anyway, so the opponent doesn't even know that you have it. So, but depends on the situation. So sometimes there can also be situations where then attacking with the reclaimer improves your clock, and but I would keep it open as long as possible, I would say.
Yeah, if you are in doubt, probably you just
But
keep it
but
up.
but I wanted to note here, especially with the endurances, it's very cool. So there are possible lines that you sacrifice your Bajukabok and then you shuffle it back in your deck. So it still is a possible thing, but then you need a time window of like 2 rounds, I would say. And yeah, it's not that easy to get, but that's a way to solve the problem that you have the Bojuka Bog already drawn, because the endurance can be discarded from your hand, and the Bojuka Bog can't be discarded from your hand or from your deck, I mean. So this this can be a safe route to get an out back into the deck if you're just targeting yourself with the endurance.
Yeah, I think we can proceed to game 3.
But that's a corner case, so this will almost never come up.
So game 3 is probably going to be a little harder, usually, because being on the draw against such explosive deck can be hard. But let's see how it.
Yeah.
We
So
open a good
here,
hand, I
yeah,
think.
I agree. So it's an okay hand. So I have the endurance as the protection. I have a couple of live draws to protect for the next turns or the next turn. And here the opponent mulligans to 6. So I don't think that it's reasonable to mulligan for a double protection hand here. So we just have the one protection. So it's risky because if they have the discard spell, they can set it up and then go off next turn. But as I mentioned, we also have a couple of good cards to draw from the top. And usually I would say like the Reanimator starts are like going off very fast, or the normal 6 card hands like going off with the Dark Ritual and Tomb into Reanimation spell, or most often Faceless Looting lines. And with the Faceless Looting lines we already protected, because if they Faceless Looting first and then discard, we can just take their creatures out of the graveyard. But here I would say they have the nut draw. So here they start with the Grief, pitching the Unmask, have 3 cards in their hands left, and then they discard and have exactly Dark Ritual and Tomb and Reanimate that.
Oh my god.
So not even the Reanimate, so they are able to draw 14 here. And you can imagine that not that much will be
It's not
remain.
going good for us, yeah.
Yeah, that much will remain in my hand after the round. So here they just have drawn too many
Yeah.
cards. And
In hindsight, I think the keep is okay. You cannot be greedy like that and just try to move into double protection. I think it's was okay.
yeah,
You have to accept that sometimes they have it all.
yeah. But here you see, here we have the exact situation that the opponent had the animate that start.
Oh, you
So
added the
here,
force of vigors. I see.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So that's what I mean. So I think that it's much better on the draw, because on the play the discard spells work better, and on the draw we don't have really access to the discard spells, and with the Force of Vigors we have more turn zero protection. So I would say we have like endurance
Yeah,
is
you are
full
you are
protection.
dealing with 1/3 of their reanimation spells on turn 0. Yeah,
Exactly.
makes sense. Makes sense.
So yeah, I would also say agree that the keep was reasonable, and he had just had a nut draw, so he had the discard spell into the going off, but more likely they are trying to going off, or they have a setup with a faceless looting, and here they were just too fast for me. So, but it was
Yeah,
still okay, I would
not
say.
much to play around here.
No, but still okay. I was 5-1 here in this after this round,
Yeah.
but the big problem was that I had the down pair, and by the down pair, my tiebreakers were a bit worse, I would say. So I was starting the last round with 7th place, and this meant to me that I probably don't have a good chance to jump into the top 8 if I lose the last round,
Yeah,
but
so it was a win for you.
win it in exactly. So, any other additions to this match, or should we
Not really.
proceed?
I think there's not much to comment. Just keep in mind to bring in your force of vigors as if you want to bring it on the play as well. It's up to you, but for sure on the draw, I think it makes a lot of sense. Even if it's fringe, uh, they sometimes have to keep these kind of hands when they just go off turn 1 or turn 2 using all they have, so they don't have really a choice to not play the enemy dead. So force of vigor could be really really strong here.
Yes,
That's all. I think.
totally agree. So the game was short and painless.